Welcome back to BT on a Wednesday morning. Our post-U.S. election coverage continues, and right now we're going to bring in Peter Wagner from News 1130, usually based in Whatcom County, but on assignment in Seattle right now. Peter, welcome back. And there was a little bit of unrest with some demonstrations happening in Seattle last night. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, Thor. Well, first of all, good morning. Last night, it was not long after those first election results had come out, we got word that there was a protest group that was beginning to march from Cal Anderson Park. So for those that are familiar with the Chaz Chop, the occupied zone on Capitol Hill over the summer, that's basically where this march started. A lot of Black Lives Matter signs waving, chants. They moved through the streets in a very typical pattern that we've seen in these demonstrations in the past, blocking major intersections with a phalanx of police pushing them down the road. Now, when I was there, by the time I got to the rally, I wasn't able to get close to any of the demonstrators because there was just a wall of Seattle police, some carrying batons, some on bicycles, some even in a SWAT vehicle that looked more at home in some sort of warfare setting than it did on the streets of Seattle. So the police pushing them down the road, saying you can't block intersections, you can't do any of this, you have to keep moving, eventually declaring it that it was an unlawful assembly, that they had to get people to move off the streets. At one point, even while I and a few other news photographers were on scene trying to capture video of some police activity, we were threatened by a Seattle police officer who warned us that we needed to leave or face arrest, despite the fact that we were behind the protest line and were on a public sidewalk. But I think that also just speaks to the tenor and the tone of police relations with people in Seattle here. I will say it was nowhere near as sizable as some of the previous demonstrations over the summer in Seattle, but it was big enough that it got a very large police presence here, although it ended with what appeared to be a number of arrests and a group then staging on a sidewalk. So nowhere near as big as that big conflagration over the summer, but still a lot of people just generally unhappy with the state of things here in the U.S.
And just talking to people on both sides of the political spectrum in Seattle there, what were you hearing and what was the sentiment overall as we just saw this super close race, and we're still not, it's still too close to call as the votes continue to be tabulated?
Well, I think the feeling is a bit of uncertainty and a bit of anxiety, because we have been in this situation before, Thor, where we really don't have a clear answer, even going into the Wednesday morning after. What's really complicating this, and I think adding a great deal of anxiety for Republicans and Democrats as well, is the president's comments last night, talking about how, well, for all intents and purposes, I've won. Despite the fact that there are still hundreds of thousands of ballots that have not been cast. So I think Democrat or Republican, a president of the United States saying, I've won, before the results are in, is going to be very, very anxiety-inducing. So I think for a lot of Americans today, the question is going to be what comes next and what's going to have to happen after this. It's uneasy. I don't think I've talked to a single person who hasn't had to use a lot of antacids today. I know that I'm going to be heading that way shortly, but it's just a lot of anxiety. And it's interesting, too, I think, Thor, because we knew this was going to happen. We knew we weren't going to get a big result last night. And yet here we are all anxiously refreshing and watching TV and listening to the radio to find out more. But I think the top line, anxiety.
Right. Many people feeling that this morning. You follow events in Washington State, obviously, very closely with respect to politics. How does it break down with the voters and red versus blue in Washington State, Peter?
Well, I have to tell you, Thor, nothing really exciting happened last night. Washington has been a reliably blue state in many, many, many elections. No election in my lifetime has delivered electoral votes to a Republican, and nothing really changed last night. This state will be delivering its electoral votes to Vice President Joe Biden. Also, Democratic Governor Jay Inslee. I know you and I have talked about him before in terms of the pandemic. He is being given a third term, fairly historic for him as well. First time in decades that a governor in Washington will be serving a second term. But here, it's status quo. A lot of blue candidates west of the mountains and a lot of red candidates east of the mountains. But for the most part here, this is a deep blue state.
And Peter, you mentioned the tension and the anxiety. Once the results roll in and we do have a clear winner, hopefully in the next couple of days, are we anticipating some more demonstrations depending on where that goes in major places like Seattle?
Well, I think it's highly possible that people would want to take to the streets. I think, we're fast approaching a very dangerous point in the democracy where, we need to have clarity about the winner, and we need to agree as a nation on who the winner is. I think it's very possible that people will not take that standing down. I think a lot of the stuff I'm seeing today is saying that people are not just going to stand idly by and allow the president to just simply declare that he is the winner of the election. We have a process. We have a system. We have an ancient system by American standards. And I think a lot of Americans, Republican or Democrat, want to see what that final result is. And if we don't see it, well, people might end up taking to the streets again.
Yeah, and the fact checkers were working overtime last night when Trump was speaking during election night, wasn't he?
Smoke coming out of their ears, I think. Yeah,
that's right. All right, Peter, thanks so much as always for your time, and we'll check in with you as the story develops.
All right, thanks, Thor.
All right, you take care. That's Peter Wagner, News 1130.